Today's software is IBM's Planning Analytics. It's available as a cloud-based or on-premise solution. So today we're going to show you it working through a browser that's connected to a server in the cloud. It's actually in a different country. And then at the end, I'll also show you how you can interact with this using Excel locally on the desktop as well. So Planning Analytics will help you automate your planning, budgeting, and forecasting processes to generally replace manual Excel-based planning that can be error-prone and repetitive in places. So if we look here, what you see on the screen, it's the workspace that you're presented after you log in. So the folders are split into your personal content that's only viewable to you, and shared content that's viewable to your team. So this is secured via Active Directory, your Windows logins, and it can be restricted to different users, different teams can see the content that's important to them, and as well as the folder structure. We can also control data within the cubes at whatever level makes sense for your business across companies, charts of accounts, and so forth. So if we jump in here to the SmartGo P&L workbook, the cubes here are available on my left. So this is what I can view from the server. So today we're looking at a income statement cube. So if I just browse through here, I can bring the data into the canvas. So what we're looking at is a P&L cube for a demo company called SmartGo that manufacture electronic components. And we're looking at the P&L here on the rows. So I can drill into more detail on the rows. So if I want to see what's behind my gross margin or payroll, I can drill into more detail here. I can swap the detail in the columns. So we're looking at a monthly view, but if you want to change that to quarters, it's quite easy to change that, and also then drill into more detail on the quarters. I can also do things like changing the minute we're looking at Massachusetts organization, we can switch it to total company. Everything's updating, and we can say drag company into the rows as well. So it's very flexible to get at the information that you want to see. Now we'll jump into some more visuals in a second, but just to give you an idea of how we could create some charts off this information. If I just go through here and duplicate that table, so we've got a second one here at the bottom, and if we wanted to look at something like budget and forecast, so I'm just going to change this to bring in budget and forecast. And if we wanted to look at that by, say, month, we can change this to our months. And drag it into the rows. Okay, so now we've got a view here of budget and forecast by month. And what we can do is click on the visualization button, and Planning Analytics will suggest a visualization that makes sense for whatever data you're looking at. So in this case, perhaps a column chart would look quite good, and we can also just minimize that header information. So it's quite easy and intuitive to create quick visuals of the data you're looking at. And then I can save this workbook my individual folder, or if you've got access, you can save it for your team as well. So going on to the budget P&L. So this is just a P&L on the budget that was created as a dashboard. So as you can see, we've got the chart of accounts as rows here in the table, and we've got the quarters along the top, and we've shown some of the key account lines for the P&L: net profit, gross revenue, cost of sales on the bottom, with OPEX here in the top right, and a bit more breakdown on the OPEX categories. So you can see here towards the end of the year, occupancy is increasing sharply. So you may want to be looking into more detail on that. And in this dashboard view, I can also change the region like this, and everything is updating, in real time as I make these selection changes. So that's just an example of a dashboard page. On the next tab, if we look at quarterly forecast, so the scenario here is that this company does an annual budget, and then they do quarterly forecasts to amend that annual budget. So in this case, we have 6 months of actuals up to June, and the forecast period for those months is dynamic in that it equals the actuals for the lapse period. And then the remaining 6 periods of forecast are set by the forecasting process. So what I'm going to show you here is how you would roll the actual period forward in the model. So I'm not just doing visualizations, dashboards. We're actually changing data within the model and showing you how that would work. So in reality, this screen would probably be on a separate page, controlled by the area within financial control or the application owner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the July forecast period to October and bring the actual values into the forecast version. So we should see these 3 periods change, and then our full year value for forecast will also change. And everything is calculated in real time on the fly on the server. So if I change that to October, we can see here that these 3 months have in fact changed. Our visual did update, and our full year forecast has now also been updated. Now that looks relatively simple at the top level, but what it's actually doing behind the scenes is it's calculating that updated forecast across all the dimensions in the cube. So across all your periods, companies, locations, departments, accounts, whatever level of detail you have in your GL. So it's effectively millions of cells that it's calculating very quickly using this high performance in-memory engine. So that's how we can roll the actual periods forward. If we then look at how we would want to perhaps update these forecast values themselves, we go to the Update Forecast tab. And here we're looking at some OPEX accounts. So the rent line here, we may in fact want to change how we calculate these last 3 periods. So for this demo, we have some built-in methods, and these are completely customizable to how you run your business. But for the purpose of a demo, we've put in a few saying that the forecast periods, you could make them equal the budget value per each period. You could squeeze the full year remaining budget into those last 3 periods so that your full year budget would match your full year forecast. Perhaps take an average of the prior 3 months or set the last year actual. So I can set each of those at an account level, and then that will calculate across all dimensions within the cube. And again, it's just restating here in the top right that we're actually on a 9 period of actual with 3 periods of forecast. So just before I change that forecast method, I'm just going to drill into the occupancy category here in the chart so we can see that. So we've drilled into occupancy. We're looking at rent, utilities, and maintenance. And I'm going to change the forecast for rent to say that our rent agreement hasn't changed. So across the board, we're going to make rent equal last year actual. And you can see that that's just updated. It didn't change substantially, so it was just a minor change here in the chart. But now these periods of rent are equal to last year's actuals, again, calculated in real time. So moving on, that's on the expense side for the forecast. But if we wanted to affect the revenue side, I've jumped across here to a sales cube. So some of the dimensions are a bit different on the sales side in that we have the product dimension here showing our phones, PCs, tablets. I can also drill into the different product categories within that. And I have the distribution methods, the channel that we're selling these products through. So that's given us a breakdown of our volume numbers across those dimensions, and then sales price giving us our total gross revenue, and then our direct cost per unit times our volume giving us our COGS, and then calculating a gross margin and gross margin percent. So on the revenue side, we can also do lots of dashboards. There's many different types of visualizations in here, similar to what I showed on the budget P&L. But the key thing we want to look at here is changing a volume forecast. So this table is showing us our volumes against product. We could also have this against different locations to segment your forecast into different areas. Perhaps you've got different people looking after different areas, so they can control each of those and set the budget for that. That is then automatically consolidated at the top level. But for today's demo, we're just going to change this at the total company level. So we've got the concept here of a sandbox. So what a sandbox is it's where I can create a what if version of the data. So let's just go in and create a sandbox. So that's going to take a snapshot of all the data in the base cube and create a new version that I can then change and review before applying back to the main version. So if I just call this version demo, create that, then we can see here that we're in the version demo. I can then say, okay, we want to increase our PC volume, but we want to hold the laptop number at 30,000. So I'm going to add 10,000 units of volume to PCs, but I want to keep laptops at 30,000. So I can right click here, hold that number, and then onto the 51,000, I can add 10,000. So the changes that I've just made are shown in blue, and you can see that the laptops hasn't moved. And if I like the look of those numbers, I can keep those, or I can always go back to the base version as well. And I can see the effects of those volumes in my margin cube as well. So over here, you can see that the blue numbers is what's changed, and I can change this back to a base as well to see if I want to keep that or not. So if I did want to commit that, I would come back to my volume and go to my version that I've changed and just tick the commit data button, and that will make those changes back in the main version and calculate that across the board. So back to our forecast. So that's an overview of how you could change expenses and revenue within planning analytics. Next tab we have here is another dashboard. So we've updated our forecast and we want to compare that to our annual budget. So here then, for the periods that have changed, I can change this slider to October, November, December, and analyze the headline figures for those changes I've just made that are calculated automatically, and see the variance, traffic lights here, green, red, if it's favorable, unfavorable, and a bar chart here showing it across the OPEX. Next example, just to show you how we can model some data in planning analytics. We're showing an allocation on the expense side. So here we're allocating our travel expenses from Massachusetts, and we're allocating that across the other businesses. So here we have 42K sitting in travel in Massachusetts, and we could decide how much of that we want to allocate and using what driver. So rather than 100%, let's say we want to just allocate 50% of that 42K. So I've changed that to 50. It's calculating that, in fact, we're going to allocate 21K. And I can choose how I want to allocate that to the target entities. So again, this can be whatever fits your business, but for this example, we're using FTE. And next tab is going to break that detail into individual rows, so we can see how that allocation of 21K is calculated using the FTE from each of the target entities to calculate a ratio and calculate the allocation. And then there's a visual here at the bottom showing how the 20K is spread across the other regions. So that is just one allocation line. You could do as many of these as would make sense, and we could see a summary allocation across the entire company and showing the consolidation of all rows, again calculated in real time and showing the effects of what I just changed. So last thing we're going to show here on the modeling side is a currency change. So here we have a currency tab that shows us the Canadian and British pound FX rates. And this company has operations in Canada. So if I were to change the actual rate, so let's say the US dollar strengthened in the second half of the year. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change these 6 months from 0.9 to 0.8. And then what it's going to do is it's going to calculate the impact of that FX variance in the table below. So let's just change that first. So I can just use the syntax to send that number to the right, 0.8. So using one input, I've just updated these cells. And then you can see the impact here in the table below. So it's showing me my core performance variance with the FX rate taken out of it. So it's calculating my budget versus actual at the budget rate. So the currency doesn't make an impact here. And then in the FX variance column, we can see what the local actual difference is calculated based on the difference in two currency rates. So again, just showing how we can model calculations and mixing it with data that's been input on the fly. So that's a real quick overview of the web front end. Next thing I'm going to show you here is within Excel. So this is Excel on my local desktop, not in the cloud, and we have a planning analytics add-in installed. So what that enables me to do is to connect to the instance in the cloud and interact with that same data. So everything that I've just changed in the cloud would automatically be updated and shown in these views. So I can explore that data in a similar fashion to what we're doing on the web. So I've got in a view of the P&L here with account lines and budget forecast actual on the columns. I can say drag in company and to the rows to replace accounts. So again, interacting with it, making changes, and I could even stack two dimensions. So I can look at for each company, I could see the detail of the P&L. So it's a bit like pivot table, but it's obviously coming from a central secure source for your data. So that's exploring some data. Next thing we can look at is how we can drill on the data. So in this view, slightly different to the first in that I can now go into the detail of each account line. And the number of levels here will be totally based on how your general ledger is set up, but there's pretty much limitless number of levels here that you could go to on the detail for each dimension. And so that's a dynamic report. And last thing I'm going to show you here is how you can customize the data. So if I add this view to a new sheet, these cells are coming from the Planning Analytics server, and this is the default view that came in from the server. I can just overtype these cells and make changes. So if I change total year to January, as you can see, it's recalculating these values on the fly. So we're now looking at January's 2017 budget versus actual. And if I wanted to see that on the screen at the same time, perhaps I want to see 2018. I'm just using Excel functionality here. So I'm copying the 2017 data, pasting it here, and let's change this to 2018. And you can see that the cells are updating as I do that. So this is cells that I've copied and pasted. Next thing we might want to do is perhaps calculate a year-on-year variance. So if I were to copy those cells here and change this to say year-on-year variance, what I can then do is just use normal Excel formulas to interact with the data coming from Planning Analytics. So just a simple A minus B like that. So I'm now blending Excel formulas with the data from Planning Analytics, and it's calculating that straight away. And last thing I'm going to show you is inserting a new row. So if I copy that row and just paste it to the bottom, I've added a new row. It's obviously repeating this, but if I want to show some other measures from that chart of accounts, and I know we have FTE in there, I could do that. And as you can see, it's refreshing this on the fly. So this is an example of how you can build, some fairly sophisticated reports and packs from, perhaps your monthly board pack, management accounts pack that you could build using Excel reporting as well. So that was a quick overview of a lot of the points of Planning Analytics. If there's any questions or anything else you want to ask me to show you, I'm happy to do that for a few moments.